Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the HockeyNorth Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tyler Kroom, joined here with the one and only Brendan Pawliw. Brendan, how are you doing?
Busy, but good. Thank you for asking. How are you?
I'm doing good. And I think we're both we're coming fresh off the Kraken Avalanche Game 7 here. And the Kraken got it done. They held on. They shut down the McKinnon line, and they came out on top, and they're heading to the second round. Is that something you may have expected, or are you a little bit caught off guard with the new franchise knocking off the defending Cup champs?
To be quite honest with you, I wasn't that keen on Colorado this year in the playoffs. They were injured. They were inconsistent. They showed towards the end of the year a much closer resemblance as to who they are as a team. But, everyone was waiting for Seattle to kind of fall during the regular season and miss the playoffs. Never happened. And then no one gave them a chance here against the defending champs. And, they proved they were a legit team. And of course, it's the Colorado ex-goaltender from a few seasons ago, and Philip Grubauer stunning them and kind of sticking it to them in game number 7. And, just goes to show you, anything can happen in the playoffs at any time. And you take a look at defending Stanley Cup champion gone, President's Trophy winner in the Boston Bruins gone, upset by the Florida Panthers. 43-point differential between those two teams, largest ever between two playoff opponents in NHL history. And of course, you have the long-standing contenders, Tampa Bay Lightning, also gone, ousted by the Toronto Maple Leafs in 6 games. So a lot of the betting favorites out the window. Edmonton did not have it easy against Los Angeles, although they are advancing to round 2. But, Seattle, I think the big takeaway for me is just how fast and aggressive they are. I've watched a few of their games, but just to see them, at playoff speed, just amazing at how fast that team is.
Oh, certainly. And I wasn't quite sure what to make of the Kraken heading in. I think they were good at times in the first half of the season, and they kind of slid back a bit into the wild card there as teams like Edmonton and LA started getting hot again, and same with Vegas. But you know what? I got the same takeaway as you on the Kraken. They're a very fast team, and they're not completely healthy either. Of course, Burakovsky wasn't available to them in this first round, and they lost Jared McCann quite early, and that's a 40-goal scorer out of the lineup. And they didn't skip a beat, and I think that shows a lot of resiliency in the lineup. And Grubauer was a big question mark heading in, but I think he's been really good in the playoffs so far, and I think it's good to see that team be able to take that step, and we'll see what they can do here against the Dallas Stars in the second round.
Yeah, I would have to say, at least right now, I'm looking pretty good in my work playoff pool. I loaded up on Stars and Golden Knights, and I've got 9 out of my 10 players left, and few of my coworkers and friends not so lucky after round 1.
Yeah, well, my first round isn't looking too hot. So I thought the Islanders would get it done against Carolina, and of course they fell short in 6. And then, you touched on it a bit there. The Boston Bruins getting ousted in Game 7 by the Florida Panthers. So and then I also picked Colorado. I thought Colorado was going to come out of this one. This will have some really good players that can put the team on their backs. But again, Seattle played really good. So I'm not entirely upset about it, but my pool definitely did take a big hit in round 1. But I still got one more team. I had the Devils winning against the Rangers in 7. Game 7, of course, is on Monday tomorrow, as of the day we're recording here. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, it should be another interesting matchup, and which has had a lot of twists and turns as well.
Absolutely. So next up on the agenda here, we do have another Cariboo Cougar alumni, Northern BC product, goaltender Griffin Outhouse as our guest today. Maybe just touching a bit on what Griffin's bringing into this podcast for us.
Griffin, is a national champion for one. The UNB Reds of University of Brunswick, winning that national championship in March. So, of course, there's that. There's him being the star netminder to what he was for 4 seasons with the Victoria Royals. We touched about that, growing up in likely in the Cariboo region, and just a little bit of everything. And of course, be remiss not to mention how dominant he was in that overtime victory several years ago against the Regina Pat Canadians to give the Cariboo Cougars their first and only Max Midget Championship down in Calgary. So no shortage of topics that we discussed in our half-hour-long chat. And yeah, it's always nice to get another Northern on. Griffin's obviously a well-known name in these parts, and it's nice to have him on our podcast. And I know we had Paige on earlier on in the season, so it's nice to get both of them.
Absolutely. And both Griffin and Paige they're great people to talk to, and it's always a pleasure having them here on a podcast. And but before I head into the interview, I know it's probably looking a little bit bleak now, but just a Northern athlete update from around the region and seeing where all our guys are at. And I know Nico Majadovic had a really nice goal against Kamloops in game 1 here for the Western Conference Final, but I'll leave the rest up to you, Brendan.
Yeah, Nico Majadovic and the Seattle Thunderbirds holding serve on home ice. 2-0 lead in their best of 7 against the Kamloops Blazers. Of course, games 3 and 4 in Kamloops starting on Thursday. Should be a raucous crowd just 5 hours down the highway here from PG to Kamloops. Nico Majadovic, as you mentioned, on that stacked Seattle team. Maybe not the most points this year in the playoffs for Nico, but still a very solid playoff form. He got his second goal of the playoffs. Seattle just 10 games in the WHL postseason, similar to the Blazers, as they swept both their first and second round opponents. Elsewhere in the Saskatoon Blades, in the Western Hockey League, the Saskatoon Blades going to have to dig down deep again for the third consecutive series, down a 2-0 in terms of a whole, as we got Smith Redmond of Prince George on that team. He's played in 3 playoff games. And, of course, draft-eligible prospect Tanner Mollendijk of McBride, logging a ton of minutes for the Blades, 8 points in 16 games. Blades missing a couple of veteran defensemen in their lineup so far during this series, but Saskatoon looking to reverse their fortunes at home as well. So that does it for the Western Hockey League. BCHL, Nathan Mackey and the Salmon Arm Silverbacks down 0-2 to the Penticton Vs in their third-round matchup in the interior. Mackey, a good playoff so far for the Prince George product, 13 points in 11 games. And, of course, Brady McIsaac of the Alberni Valley Bulldogs, Prince George product. He's got 2 assists in 4 playoff games this year, but Bulldogs also holding serve on home ice with a 2-0 lead over the Chilliwack Chiefs in their Coastal Series. AJHL, the season has come to an end for Brophy Dunn and the Spruce Grove Saints, losing in 5 games to the Brooks Bandits in the AJHL final. Dunn, of course, in his final season of Junior A hockey. He had 1 assist in 15 games for Spruce Grove. He'll be going to Nate next year, so congratulations, Brophy. And, of course, Hunter Brown, just the 3 helpers in 11 games these playoffs. Had a pretty solid regular season, 39 points in 49 games. Got a little bit of the injury bug there towards the end of the year and into the playoffs, so likely not as healthy as he probably wanted to be for the playoff run. But again, thanks to our Northern athletes who are still competing and still thriving in the playoffs. And for those that just finished up, congratulations. And from us here at Hockey North, of course, happy to see you move on to your future endeavors if you are graduating 20. And if you're still coming back next year with your respective clubs, good luck for next year and hope you have a great summer.
That's very well said. And, I miss having these long, extended reviews of all our Northern athletes. And I know with the playoffs, it's going to be winding down. So let's do a little preview heading into our interview here with Griffin Outhouse.
Yeah, of course, Griffin, as you know, Victoria Royal, obviously one of those guys that had to fight to make it at every level he's been, not being the biggest goalie per se, just fighting through obstacles, carving out his niche, as it were, and just being one of those Northern BC products. We mentioned, obviously, the tie with his sister, Paige Outhouse, who plays UPEI. So Both Outhouse players are out in Atlantic Canada there, getting some exposure at the youth sports level, taking advantage of their educational opportunities. So yeah, it's been a good thing for them, and I couldn't have been happier with this chat with Griffin. Really, going down memory lane, whether it's Cariboo Cougars, even dipping into the brief pro stint that he had with Manitoba and with Jacksonville. So yeah, we cover the whole gamut here in the next 30 minutes. And so without any further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy my chat here with the one, the only Griffin Outhouse. Welcome back to the HockeyNorth Podcast. Here with me now, a familiar face to many here in the North, Griffin Outhouse, Cariboo Cougar graduate, Victoria Royals, and now with the national champion, UNB Reds. Griffin, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me here.
Well, Griffin, got quite the reputation here up in the North, just due to you being from the Cariboo, playing with the Cariboo Cougars, as you mentioned, down in the Dub now at U Sport. Just maybe talk about, your last year that you just had. It was quite a special year for yourself, as well as UNB ending up in a national championship. Just talk about how that feels.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's super exciting to be champions, to win nationals. We fell short a little bit last year. We lost out in the quarterfinals. So the guys who were there last year were, we all felt a little bit sour about it, and just continued to work through this year. And it was super fun. Nothing like I've ever experienced before.
And we were talking off here just before our interview that, the program is very run professionally. It's kind of got that mini pro feel to it, kind of like what an NHL or an AHL team would have. Just maybe talk about that type of atmosphere and how the players and coaches at UNB kind of push you to be at that next level.
Yeah, it is very similar to pro. Like every guy on the team is like super dedicated to hockey, and they want to play at the next level. The guys that we get in, number one thing at UNB is like good character guys. Gardner McDougall does a great job of bringing them in, and you can see how good of a job he's done. Is we are champions this year, and prior to this, I think they went 3 out of 4 years they had won. And you have guys like Rob Henniger, who was a player at UNB, got an NHL contract out of there, and goalie coach Kyle McDonald works with Jake Allen in the summers. Jake even spoke up about it after we won nationals. He was in the media talking. He said the same thing. It's run like a pro team.
Yeah. So maybe talk about, your journey to University of New Brunswick. I know we're kind of going a bit backwards here in terms of your time in the game, but you had just finished your time with the Royals, spent a year in pro that got disrupted due to the pandemic, and then you ended up in the youth sports level. Just talk about how the last couple of years have kind of been trying, but you've finally been able to kind of get back on your feet here.
Yeah, so I had my 4 years in Victoria. Great organization as well. I was given lots of opportunity there, and thankful for the opportunities that the coaches GM gave me. The guys there were great. Moving into pro, it was a bit of an eye opener for me. See how hard, especially at the AHL level, Manitoba, see how hard the guys work there every day. It was motivating. It made me want to work harder as well. I had a lot of fun there. And the season was disrupted by COVID. I actually had ended a little bit earlier as I had an injury. So that cut me short at the end of January. And from there, I just thought to reach out to, it would have been Dylan Taylor. He's based out of PEI, but he's one of the recruiters for UMB and the main recruiter. And he'd reached out to me in my 20 year and asked about my thoughts about going to UNB. And, I ended up going pro that year, but I just thought about the combo that we had, and I reached out to him again, and he said, yeah, I'll talk to Gardner. And next thing I know, I'm getting a ring from coach. And from there, just head into the first year, which was also a COVID year. It was good to be practicing lots. Sometimes you miss out on that, especially the older you get, the more games you play. So, still wish you would have been playing games, but it was good to get those practices in. And had, some injuries here and there. I had a couple injuries my first year, my first year of eligibility. And then this past year, I had an injury coming into the season, and then got another one just before the season. So it's been a bit of a roller coaster for me. I didn't get in the net a ton this year. The other guy, Samuel Richard, he was MVP at Nationals. He got goalie of AUS, rookie of the year AUS, phenomenal goalie, great guy, unbelievable guy. So as the older guy who's been there for a few years, you kind of sit there and a little bit sour, but it was also motivating for me to just see how hard he works and how successful he was and how he was doing. And, to have that kind of the goalie battle going on, and I'm trying to push him and he's trying to stay ahead. And, he did a great job. He was unbelievable for the team.
Mm-hmm. Now let's go back to your time, all the way back to AAA here with the Cariboo Cougars. You come to Cariboo from the Pursuit of Excellence program, have an outstanding year with the Cougars. Your most memorable moment with the Cougars came at the final of the Max tournament, where you stood on your head to help earn an overtime victory for the Cougars against the Regina Pat Canadians. Just take us through that season and that game.
Yeah, that was one of the best years of my life. I had so much fun in Prince George. The guys were really close. Starting off the year, I can't remember too much about the regular season, to be honest. It was a couple of years ago. I remember losing my first game, actually. I didn't play too hot. And Dorn Luding, who I'm still great friends with today, he played the second game, played really good, and we won. And Trevor Sprague still gave me opportunity, and I cashed in on those, and I had a pretty good regular season going into the Max tournament. So we knew we had a good team, but you got teams from mainly over Western Canada, couple international teams, but kind of go in hoping that you're going to win. You're going to do everything you can. And we played so during the round robin, and it looked like we were going to be out. And there was a big upset. One of the lower teams beat one of the top teams like 8-9, something ridiculous. And we're all in the dressing room. It was after a game. I think we had tied the game. And somebody whipped out their phone. They're like, oh my goodness, like we're going. And we're like, what? And everybody's trying to do the math, and we're all just being a bunch of dummies doing that. And anyways, our coach came in and told us that we got the 8th seed. So we're playing the first seed, which was Germany U17 team, I believe. And going into the game, we didn't really know what to expect. We hadn't been playing too great, and they handled their grouping pretty well. And we went in, and I thought I had a good game. Our MVP for sure that game was Chase Dubois. He had 2 goals, 2 goals that game. And then I believe the semifinal was that same day. So I think it was the quarters and then the semis was that same day. So then later that day, we were playing against the Calgary something or others. I don't know what they were. I know that they had Matthew Phillips, though, who, I played 3 years with in junior. He's unbelievable. He's one of the top goal scorers in the AHL. I think that's 2 years in a row he's been up there in stats. And he was the best player in the tournament. I want to say he got a couple on me, but we ended up squeaking out a 5-4 win in overtime. I think we were up 4-1 going into the third, up by 3. I think Philly got a couple on me, and I knew him at the time from being like the Royals camp and stuff. And then the next year was both of our rookie years. So anyways, we won that one. And we just couldn't believe what was going on. Like, we knocked off the number 1 and 2 teams coming from being the 8th seed, and we were playing Regina, who played well in their quarterfinal and semifinal game. They were also a low seeded team. They might have even been the 7th seed. So they weren't one of the top teams in the tournament, or they weren't in the round robin anyways, but we went in against them and we scored right off the bat first shift. I think it was I can't even remember who scored, but I think it was the first shift, and then they ended up scoring late in the first, I think, and it was kind of just deadlocked from there. Like, everybody was pretty nervous, didn't know what was going on, and the game just kept going on. We ended up going into double overtime. My billet brother, Darren Hards, he took a penalty in overtime. And obviously it didn't cost us, but I remember guys saying, like, after the game, like, Darren, like, when you took that penalty, we thought the game was over. Like, they just had so much pressure, and then we're getting the opportunity. And I made a couple. I kind of maybe get a little more credit than I deserve on some of the saves in overtime. I don't even know if I knew where the puck was. I was kind of just flopping around, and a couple managed to hit me. And then in double overtime again, I think our MVP of the tournament was Chase Dubois. He kind of fired one from the corner, and I think it was going wide, to be honest. And it hit Regina's goalie's pad, I think, and just went in, and like, nobody could believe that it just went in. Everybody's kind of like looking around, and then sure enough, Chase is throwing his helmet off right away. And yeah, so we ended up winning that one 2-1 in double OT, and that was one of the most exciting moments of my life. Like, just the nail biter of a game, and to come out on top, and when you think you weren't even going to get a shot in the playoff round.
As a goaltender, when you're having one of those games where, you're stopping everything that comes your direction, how do you know mentally that you're kind of like in that zone where you kind of feel like nothing can get by you?
I would say that you don't really, like, you might feel good, but it's kind of something you like realize after the game, because like, when you're playing your best, you're not thinking. Like, everything's just coming to you. The puck seems like it's coming slow, but it's like not really something that you pick up during the game. You're like, oh, I'm really in the zone, because you're not thinking about external factors. It's like you're comfortable and you feel good, but it's not really something you pick up until after the game. You're like, geez, like, the puck seems slow, everybody seems slow, I seemed faster than normal.
Mm-hmm. And after that season in Cariboo, you garnered the attention of Victoria Royals. You had 4 great years there. It seems like every time you came to the CN Center, you would play your best, or you would stone the Prince George Cougars. Were you kind of, I don't want to say sour, but you kind of carry that chip on your shoulder, knowing that you were kind of playing next door, and they kind of let you slide a little bit, and you were, got picked up by a division rival? Did you kind of Did you kind of want to stick it to him a little bit?
I wouldn't really say it that. So my year with Cariboo, I signed kind of midway through the year with Victoria. So it wasn't like something where PG passed on me even after watching me play in Prince George and stuff. Like I had already been listed with the Royals. I mean, at the time it would have been cool if I had been drafted by Prince George, being the closest team to Williams Lake where I was living at the time. But yeah, I don't know. I think I was just always excited to get in the PG because I played there, a couple of years before. I would have lots of family at the game, so it's just the time where I got to see my family and friends after. Yeah, I seem to have pretty good outings in Prince George. I think all besides maybe one. I know we got beat pretty bad. I can't remember if it was I think it was my 17 year actually, just before Christmas. I think we were missing Joe Hicketts and our coach Dave Lowry. They were off at World Juniors. We had spanked pretty bad that game. But aside from that, yeah, it did seem to go my way in Prince George.
Yeah, your numbers are pretty good career-wise in the CN Center. You talk about Joe Hicketts. Obviously, you had him, Matthew Phillips. You had a lot of other skilled guys. Dave Lowry was the coach for most, if not all, of your tenure. Do you kind of look back and wish that maybe your teams could have gone a little bit further, because it seems like you're right there and you just couldn't get that one extra bounce, one extra goal, or there was that game that you lost. I think it was right at the buzzer to Kelowna or something that ended your season.
Yeah, we had, I say like every single year we had something really weird happen in the playoffs. That first year we beat Spokane in 6. Coleman Valrath, who was the 20-year-old, my mentor, for my rookie year. He started the first 3 games against Spokane, and then Dave decided to go with me for the next 3 games. We both ended up going 2-1. So we beat Spokane 4-2 in that series. And then he decided to go with Coleman for the series against Kelowna, and Coleman played great. Stole us 2 games early. Kelowna just seemed to keep clawing, coming back. And yeah, in that final game, it was we were up 2-1, and one of our most defensive players that we had, defensive forwards that we had, Jared Dimitru, kind of went a little bit past on the shot block. He was kind of just, he knew there was only a second, if that, left, and he's kind of just trying to throw his body in front of it. And I forget who the defenseman was on Kelowna. Yeah, they scored with 0.02 seconds left to tie it up, but we just couldn't believe it. Then kind of had to reset after third, going to OT, and then Calvin Turkoff ended up scoring it in OT to win it in Game 7. And I still hear a lot about that today. He's one of my good buddies, and he always reminds me that they beat us in Game 7. My second year was pretty up and down year. We struggled. We didn't win any back-to-backs against the same team. So like a Friday, Saturday game. We didn't win back-to-backs like that until the first weekend after Christmas, which was actually against Prince George. We finally got our back-to-back wins. We finished 8th that year. We played against Everett, and they had a really strong team that year, and ended up going to Game 6. I think we were scheduled to play Game 7 if it was going to go. Game 7 in Everett at 7 the next night. So this was a 2:00 game, Game 6 in Victoria, and it went it went on pretty long. They ended up shutting down the concession, and then after like another period or two, they called back the workers to open up the concession again, and the game ended at 9. I think it ended the same time that a normal game does.
Yeah.
A normal 7:00 game, but it was a 2:00 game. And went
Yeah.
to 5 overtime periods. We ended up losing that one, I think 3-2, fifth overtime. So longest game in CHL history. That was pretty cool to be a part of. Unfortunately, on the wrong end of it. My next year, we made some big trades. We went for it, and playoffs came around. We beat Vancouver in 7, I believe. Went to overtime in game 6, and then Noah Gregor scored the OT winner in that game. And then game 7, Matthew Phillips with a big shot block there last second to get us the 4-3 win. And then we ended up getting swept by Tri-City. They were a powerhouse. They're really good. I didn't have my best series there. A couple of bad games on my end. They had Dylan Coughlin, Valimaki, Jake Bean, Morgan Geeky, Rasmussen. Like their team was so good. I think we definitely could have had a closer series, competed with them. We were kind of shorthanded. First, second, and third line centermen were out. And then I believe 2 of our top 3 D-men were also out. So yeah, we had some young guys playing. And then my last year, we didn't have a great regular season. We had a pretty young team. Played our systems well though, and got into playoffs, beat Kamloops in 6, and then we ended up getting swept by Vancouver, who lost in game 7 and to PA in the WHL final. It was pretty close series, honestly, for a sweep. A 2-goal game plus an empty netter for game 1, and then back-to-back overtime losses, and then we got spanked pretty bad the last game. But we put up a good fight. We were also missing our top player, Cody McDonald, ex-Cougar, who was suspended for, I believe, 6 games.
Yeah. Looking back to when you first got into the game there, Griffin, what made you want to become a goalie?
Yeah, I actually get asked this question a lot, and it's kind of odd. I wasn't into hockey too much when I was younger. And then my cousins, so I had 3 cousins that played, and I was over at their house one day, and they were bored, and they wanted to shoot on a goalie. So they gave me a motorbike helmet, baseball glove, player glove, and some shin pads, and started shooting pucks on me in the house. And the weirdest part is that I liked it and decided that that was what I wanted to do, and I pursued that. After that, it was during the hockey season, so I waited until the next year to sign up and play, or my parents signed me up so that I could play. But in our one of the open rooms in our place when we were living in Likely, my dad would just shoot one of those floor hockey pucks on me, and I would just be in whatever I was wearing, and we'd use the bathroom door as the nets, and he would do that with me every night. And I was a little bit surprised how much bigger the nets were when I actually got in one. I wish that they were still the size of a bathroom door, but what can you do? And yeah, I don't know. It's kind of weird. I guess goalies are weird, so it makes sense. But I liked that. I just had so much fun doing that.
Mm-hmm. Now, your sister Paige played for the Northern Capitals, plays out at UPEI. Just talk about the relationship that you have with each other, and been able to kind of, push each other at times, and how, when I interviewed her on this podcast as well, she pretty much looked up to you as she was getting into the game herself.
Yeah. So we're 4 years apart. We have a really tight family. Me and all my sisters are very tight. So I remember when I was younger and I had been a few years into hockey, and I was kind of bugging them, saying that you guys should start and stuff. And my mom asked them, and they wanted to. And the twins, identical twin sisters that are a year younger than me, they also started up, and they played for a few years. And then I think once high school was done, they quit, and then they just went to school, and one's a nurse, one's a teacher. So they're not doing too bad themselves. And Paige liked it, and she was good at it, and continued through, played with the Northern Capitals, was the captain her last year there, and then went to UPEI. We actually started the same year, and that was the COVID year. So I actually was able to drive down a few times to go see her that year, which was nice. And we're both so far away from home. And she's done a great job of just continuing to work and be the best player that she can. She ran into an injury this year and was sidelined for a bit, but she battled back, and then finally got into the lineup for some of the playoff games, and I was able to watch those online, and I thought she did really well.
Mm-hmm. What are you taking out at UNB, and what's kind of like your fallback option if hockey doesn't work out for you?
So I'm in psychology. I would like to eventually take more schooling after and get my sports psych. I know that some teams in Europe, I know the UK league will often, if they want somebody, they're willing to pay for the schooling when you go play for them. So it's something I've thought about potentially doing my last, when I decide to hang him up, whenever that will be, maybe for my last 2 years, go there and get my schooling for that. And then I think that, the combination with having a sports psych and being a goalie coach, which is what I typically do in the summers, teach goalies. I think it'd be valuable to be a sports psychologist and be able to work with the goalies that you're actually teaching. Goalies tend to see sports psych at a pretty young age. Everybody knows that it's more of a mental game than it is physical. So I think that there's opportunity there for me to be able to be doing two things with those goalies.
A lot of really good hockey players have come out of, the Williams Lake, Likely area, a lot of the female players as well. What is it about that area that seems to churn out a lot of good hockey players, whether they go AAA, Junior A, get a collegiate scholarship? What is it down in that area that makes the minor hockey system so strong?
That's a great question. I don't know. After you see somebody like Carey Price, who played through Williams Lake minor hockey, more relevant for myself being a goalie, but I think a lot of people can just see, a lot of kids see, like, hey, there is a shot that I could do this for a living, that I could play in the NHL one day. Carey Price, whether you're a goalie or not, if you're a hockey player or from Williams Lake, I think, he's the hero to a lot of people. And I think that just seeing that it can be done is a lot of motivation for the kids there.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe some of your favorite, minor hockey memories, whether it be, winning a provincial, traveling to a tournament? Was there anything, pre-Cariboo Cougars that you kind of remember that sticks out to you?
Geez, they're going pretty far back here. I think through these years, we had pretty good. So every second year, we were pretty good team. I mean, we were only tier 2, but we did pretty well. We had guys, Chase Dubois, Colton Thomas, Brendan Lane. They were our 3 second years that were really good. And then also Trey Thomas, Dane Dubois, Landon Fuller. Those guys are all playing in college. We just had a really strong team every second year. So we go to a lot of tournament finals, but it seemed like there were a few other teams that were also good every second year. So I don't even want to count up the amount of silver medals I have from tournaments from those years, because we would either lose to Salmon Arm or the West Side Warriors. It seemed like every tournament. But yeah, we were really strong that year. We played the AAA team. I believe they beat us, but I think it was right there. Like, we competed with them, and it's pretty good for a small town tier 2 team playing against the tier 1 team. I believe we beat Vernon's tier 1 team that year. So we just had a really strong team every second year, and it was kind of the same group of guys every year. So we're all really excited for when that came around. But yeah, I can't really think of any like single moment that was like so great, but I just enjoyed every single year.
Last question for you. Do you take you have a huge source of pride kind of being from the North/Cariboo region? Obviously it travels a lot farther to get to places, a little bit more remote than maybe your more populous Vancouver Island, Lower Mainland areas. Do you kind of have a greater sense of pride in where you're from, knowing that and the fact that you've made it as far as you have to this point?
Yeah, being from a small town, I think it's, I do have pride from where I come from, but I think the biggest thing is like when you're playing in, a tier 2 level from a small town, you're not really going to have things given to you, whether that be like the Bantam draft or anywhere that you're going to play junior. You really got to work hard and stand out from the competition. So it's something that's like kind of ingrained in you, that you kind of have to be like hard nosed and work harder than other guys, because those guys that are playing at North Shore or BWC, or I guess now more the academies like Rink and OHA and stuff, like they're being exposed to scouts all the time, and they're getting a lot of training under their belts there, and they're playing at a tier 1 level. They're playing against the best players. So yeah, come from a small town, you just kind of know that whenever those tryouts are available, that what you did prior, the work that you did prior is going to determine how much you stand out, but you're not going to get there without the hard work.
Well, Griffin, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with me, and maybe we can do this again in the not too distant future.
All right. Thanks for having me here.
All right. Thanks, Griffin.
All right. And that's our chat with Griffin Outhouse. And what are your thoughts looking back on the interview there, Brendan?
Well, just obviously, Griffin, obviously, maybe it took him a couple seconds to kind of, maybe recollect on some of the things that I asked him, just in terms of, obviously, it was a while now, but just talking about, the relationships that, build through Cariboo, Victoria, now with UNB. I know talking about, the one penalty the Cougars took late in the overtime and, thinking, is that going to be the opportunity that Regina is going to, pull away and win that max title? Griffin made some really good saves, throughout the entire game, but especially in that overtime to win it. And then, of course, you get that, big goal shortly after to kind of slide into a bit of a frenzy there. And, that was an important moment, I think, in Northern BC hockey, and having the Cariboo Cougars, win that tournament against a very good team. And, that tournament had a lot of upsets too, as Griffin articulated about a lot of the top teams being upset or tied or beaten. And, talking about that big win against Team Germany and then not knowing their fate getting in until really an upset on the final day of the round robin too. So, I mean, they had to scrape their way in. It wasn't easy for Cariboo when they had won that title. And of course, just some heartbreaking finishes during the playoffs with the Victoria Royals. There was that last second loss there at home to Kelowna, and just some other unfortunate, playoff shortcomings where, Victoria by and large was among the elite teams of the Western Conference at that time. And, just a couple of times where they just fell short. And, unfortunately that's hockey sometimes, but it's nice to see Griffin Outhouse continuing on in his path and getting a gold medal nationally. And I know that he's got even further educational aspirations once his time at UNB is done. I think even talked about playing overseas in Great Britain during our chat, and how, the clubs there would take and help out in terms of his educational needs. And very excited to see what his path is on it.
Perfect. And we're pretty much almost done here for this week's episode of the podcast. Is there any notes you'd like to leave off with here?
No, just happy to, get another podcast here out to everybody that listens and watches on our channels. We'll have another guest here lined up for next week's show. I'm not going to tip off who that is, but the interview is done and ready to go. So you'll have to keep your eyes peeled and keep watching our podcast to see who we have lined up next.
Perfect. We'll leave it off there. Thank you, everyone, for joining in on this week's episode of the HockeyNorth Podcast. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.